I'm Brett Cooper, and this is the Frontline Mobility Edge, where we discuss the latest in mobile device technologies and how they're shaping the frontline landscape of business. Thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Welcome to this episode of the Frontline Mobility Edge. I'm Brett Cooper, joined by Dipesh Hinduja. Did I pronounce it right?
Dipesh Hinduja.
Got perfect. Yeah, after like 10 years, I finally got everybody's name right. Dipesh works as a senior director of mobile solutions at Stratix Corporation. Stratix is a partner of BlueFletch. We've been working together with you guys for, I think it's 15 years now. Dipesh, I've probably known you for 10 years now, I think. If we think
Yeah,
about it,
no.
pretty long time. But, when I think about companies that manage and run MDMs, I think about Stratix mainly because they have this, what's called their MOC, their Mobile Operations Center, which is when you think about places like the NASA room, you guys sort of have this room where it's a bunch of people at desks with large monitors managing, I'm going to call them millions of devices across your customers.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
you have a heavy hand in helping guide a lot of the selection around the tooling, devices, and other pieces that go into what your customers deploy, and Stratix is help and support for it. So I guess that's sort of my purview is like walking the office with you, just seeing all this. But can you give me a little more like what Stratix does? I know you guys do a lot more than that, and if you had to give the 30-second pitch for Stratix, and then maybe what you do in there day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. So Stratix is a pure mobility focused managed services provider. We're the largest pure mobility focused provider in the country, as far as we aware, maybe even the world. We're focused on the full life cycle of what it means to take mobile devices and help them be productive in a revenue generating or mission critical environment. So whether that is like, how do you pick the right mobility solutions for your environment, for your problems, for your next grand idea, to how do you procure it, how do you configure and deploy it? But then once it's out there, also, how do you manage the device, the platforms associated with them, and the end user expectations, the cost around it, all of those sorts of things that have to be happening from not only day one, day two, but all the way through the end of that device's life. And then at the end of the life, of course, we want to help our customers regain as much value from those devices as possible. And that could mean monetary, it could mean social good, or various other ways of saying getting the value out of their devices so they could continue on with their business or with their mission.
Yeah, I used to describe it as cradle to the grave, and I think one of your guys is like, it's cradle to the recycling center, which
Yes.
is pretty true. Yeah, you guys definitely do a lot of the taking aged equipment and either refurbing it and helping your clients resell it, or getting it to where it's decomposed into recycling. So it's a lot of interesting things there, not just the software, the hardware side, and everything else, and getting along the way. So the reason I want to have Dipesh on today is wanted to get his insight into the state of enterprise MDM and UEM in 2026. And I've always called it MDM. I think the new terminology is UEM. Is that how you refer to it, or do you still use the old terminology?
I tend to go back and forth between MDM and EMM. The whole UEM thing took it a step too far for my, for my focus really, but also for my knowledge of what it really does. So I'm in the MDM EMM space.
And it's mobile device management, enterprise endpoint management, and then unified endpoint management is how
Yes.
people describe the third one. So a lot of people use UEM as the sort of the roll up of the other ones. But yeah, MDM is what I call it still. And so if you hear
Yeah.
me use MDM or EMM or UEM, they're all interchangeable. I think for the frontline users though, there's a difference between what you guys do around mobile devices versus thinking about endpoints of laptops and PCs and those types of things. I know you guys do a little bit of that, but like when you think about a enterprise managing all of its endpoints versus mobility, especially for frontline users, what are the key differences you see there, or the things you guys focus on and help with?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, like, when we talk about frontline, we do definitely talk about the end user, the productive worker experience. When we start talking about UEM, introducing knowledge workers, but UEM also introduces IoT and other elements of it. That's kind of where it goes beyond the frontline worker experience. So when we focus on that frontline worker, and that's why we come talking about MDM and EMM a lot more. Now, we do think that they are different because when you start talking about IoT, you start talking about unattended low data, etc. When you start talking about the knowledge worker, you start talking about access to various random systems at random times, enabling them to do different things, different authentication methods. So for the frontline worker in particular, it is different. Now, I am seeing a lot of what the security model around the knowledge worker has been for, a good 5 to 10 years is coming to the frontline worker. I do think things like two-factor authentication and proximity or context-aware security is going to come to that frontline worker, whereas the knowledge worker has had it for a good amount of time now. It's not quite there, so it is different, but it's coming.
Yeah, I know for us, like BlueFletch focuses a lot on the login and security pieces, and I think the biggest difference for frontline is I'm going to call it the shared device paradigm of as a knowledge worker, you're typically assigned your iPhone or your Samsung phone or your Pixel. You're assigned your laptop, and you have those. Those are yours to carry. Whereas a frontline worker will grab a device off the rack, when they come in for their shift at the hospital, use it during the first half of the shift, put it back, and grab a different device the second half. So I think that's a much different security paradigm that we end up having to deal with, that shared workforce, which a lot of the MDMs have started to build some more of that. I know a lot of the capabilities BlueFletch provides. Worked with Stratix on a lot of projects around these is really specific to what Dipesh is calling out there. Yeah, the next question is sort of along the lines of those different device types. So I know you guys do a lot of work with Apple devices and also with the Android, and there's like printers and displays and kiosks and those types of things. When you think about companies, how I guess, how do you guide them on like the ecosystem of it'd be great if everybody was all Zebra and, just use their entire ecosystem versus like mixing their fleets? Like, how do you think about that versus balancing the right tools for the right jobs? And I know you have to play Switzerland because you work with, probably 50 different vendors every single day, but like, what's your thoughts around how to guide clients from that aspect?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. We do have to, we do support all the major OEMs. We do understand their strengths, but there is a reality to what it means to support these different OSs, especially again in revenue critical or mission critical kind of situations. So, what we're trying to encourage our customers to think about it is sort of their natural support environments for those things. So, take it like if you're in a retail store, all the equipment in that retail store is probably going to need to be supported by the same teams, by the same ways of calling into the help desk or whatever it may be, the same people coming out and doing the replacements of the equipment. So, with that in mind, it makes sense to have as uniform an environment as you can within that retail store. But maybe your trucks or your distribution center or your corporate offices, it doesn't have to necessarily be the same. You could pick the best tool for those different use cases. Now, in a lot of them, it does end up being the same because you do want to consolidate that support infrastructure as much as possible. But there is some natural ways of working that could be explored there to say, here's where we're going to say the best tool for the best job for the job. So yeah, I think there are still definitely lots of different OSs that come through there as well, especially when you have emerging technologies, which we always want our customers to be exploring the next way of doing something that they may already do or adding some new functionality that they may not have already. IoT is a good example of that. A lot of these IoT pieces of equipment are bringing in things like MQTT into the infrastructure, and it's definitely the way that the IoT needs to work, but it's also being seen in some ways of like, hey, maybe if we switch the way that we operate with our other devices onto this, it might be advantageous. It might meet our needs in a different but yet equally effective way. So we're looking at that. The bringing in multiple OSs could add those kinds of unexpected advantages.
Yeah, I guess from the standpoint of the MDM or EMM, and I'll pick on Omnissa, or not pick on Omnissa. I feel like Omnissa did a really good job early on of supporting Windows, iOS, and Android all at the same time, and then pulled in printers. And I think one of the first MDMs and EMM companies that did a solid job of doing that. I think it's becoming a lot more common across the different EMM providers. do you see a lot of people with mixed MDMs where they'll have, for their Apple devices, they'll use, Jamf, and then for everything else, they'll use Intune or AirWatch or SODI?
Yeah, I mean, uh, I would have said 2 years ago, even 3 years ago, no, it's starting to consolidate. The UEM is becoming real. These days, I've been seeing more and more people are separating them out, going for a lot of the right tool. And again, I think IoT is driving some of that, picking the tools that support IoT differently than they support iOS versus supporting Android Enterprise. And then again, as you were mentioning, Intune being so prevalent in the Windows space, you might end up with a retailer or a distribution center or a hospital even saying, we do need to use the best tool for our Windows to get those as Windows laptops to get those as secure and as well configured as possible. But we know that it's going to be different for all of our Android enterprise devices that are in the environment. And we know it's going to be different yet for all of our sensors or our printers. So they're going to pick the right tools. It would be nice if they all came down to a singular platform, but I do think that there is more and more picking the right platform to manage the right tools.
Along the lines of the Apple side of the house, I know Apple announced, correct me if I'm wrong, it's Apple Business is their new. This is Q2 26. So they announced this a little bit ago, but I think it's more of their play to compete with Google with the device management space. What's your readout on that? Maybe you can give a description of what it is and how you view it, and your readout of where that's going to go in the next few years.
So Apple Business is definitely the evolution of Apple Business Manager. I think about a year ago, they had introduced a bare bones MDM platform, Apple Essentials, which there was a fee to take advantage of. They've now rolled that into Apple Business and stripped the fee, so it's now free, and they've added additional functionality. So now not only does it do your automated device enrollment, formerly DEP, now ADE, it does your volume purchase program for apps, but it also does some very basic MDM capabilities. And I do believe that Apple themselves so calls it MDM, as well as it incorporates the ability to manage your business's presence in the Apple services. So, for instance, if you have a business that's listed in Apple Maps and you want to go there and adjust the description of it, the Apple Business platform is where you would register and do things like that going forward. So, with all of those things coming together, it's very interesting to see that. Will that attract some of the smaller businesses to actually use these MDM platforms? Because now they're free, they're part of the ecosystem. But also on the flip side of that is Google going to take the same track? Are they going to now offer their workspace or other equivalents for a free as a free offering? We've seen Samsung do that in some cases with their Knox Manage and their Knox. They had a Knox Manage Lite kind of version. I forgot the title of it. Now, is Google going to do that? Is Microsoft going to do that? Now that Apple has done that, sort of to go after that SMB market. So I do find that very interesting right now.
Yeah, it's yet to be seen, but I think Apple will continue to make great hardware, which definitely attracts people to it. On that line, one of the things I was thinking about the evolution when I was prepping for this discussion of devices. I remember in 2009, there was a CIO we met with who was like, that was a Windows CE day. He told us, I'll never go with Apple. It's too new. Nobody will ever want that. And I think 3 years later, like their entire company had iOS devices in the hands of all their employees. And then I specifically remember a conversation in 2011 with somebody else that's like, we suggested they look at Android. And the guy's like, Android, secure, like insecure, like cheap Chinese operating system. And I bit my tongue. But, I think like 5 years later, Android had a huge portion of the market share. So I think it sort of evolved from Windows CE to iOS became very predominant. And then you had Android come in on top of that for certain use cases. But, for the frontline use case, has Android become the de facto? Are you still seeing that? Or is there still a lot of people looking at iOS for certain situations?
Yeah, again, I think I have to be very careful in where I'm going here, but I do think like if you take certain industries, they are tending to move as verticals or as industries together and what the de facto is. So when you say frontline in retail, yes, I do think that there's a lot of Android enterprise momentum right now. There with the exception of some few very specialized use cases, maybe for like manager devices or maybe some kiosk kind of use cases, the Android enterprise has taken over the associate mobility use case in large part. So I do see that. Now there are places like in hospitals and healthcare where Android's making inroads, but iOS is still dominant with a lot of the clinicians, nurses working with patients directly, etc., doctors, and that's again, well, not again. That's a lot to do with their choice and comfort with the platform. So we are seeing personal preferences driving what that industry is going to choose for their employees. Now that kind of mentality of like, oh, well, we're going to choose iOS because everybody's so comfortable with it. That is something I'm starting to see wane as well. More and more people are saying, well, iOS and Android are so similar that I can put an Android enterprise device in front of my doctor and he's not going to like totally just throw it away. The hardware is just as sleek as an iOS or Apple device is, and the experience is just as intuitive as an Apple device is. So it really has started to leave that the end user's preference driving what the business picks for that industry, but it's not fully there yet. So we still do see Apple dominate some industries.
Good call out. And in the Android space, I know Zebra in North America has historically been the leader. Uh, How would you describe the rest of the field of players? I know that there's Datalogic, Samsung, Spectralink, Honeywell, and a couple other ones that are out there. Do you see a shift in people looking at different form factors and for different types of jobs, or even mixing fleets within their organizations?
Well, we're seeing industry specific choices of their OEMs. When it comes to healthcare, we do see a good amount of Spectralink. Not sure what's really driven that. I wasn't there when that happened, but we do see a lot. We're working with a lot of healthcare customers right now. But and then retail, we see a lot of Zebra. In manufacturing, we tend to see a lot of Honeywell. So these guys still do have their large pockets that are so prevalent as time goes on, I do think it's going to become the better known brands that are going to survive, the ones that are probably more closely aligned with Google and how Google is going to then push out things and stay in step with that. Those are likely to be the ones that win long term. But then that brings the question of Google itself as an OEM in there, in the Pixel brand that they have. We are seeing Pixel make inroads in a lot of places where rugged used to be the fairly normal choice, mainly because even consumer devices are becoming much more durable with the material choices and the construction methodologies that are available today, as well as the battery life that is no longer a question that I used to need to be able to replace my battery so I can make it through a day. Now it's just my battery lasts a day or more. So that is creating like a lot of choice right now for customers looking for OEMs. It is going to come down to to ecosystems that those OEMs provide, though. I still see Zebra as having a very strong ecosystem of printers, of charging docks, of software to go with it that is making some of them stand out as more compelling than others. And I think Google's recognized that they're really trying to build up their ecosystem as well. But then when you switch off to the form factor topic as well, I do see that the OEMs that, again, thinking ecosystems here, the OEMs that offer more form factors are getting more traction. The ones that are just sticking with the single device that is going to, it's not getting as much traction as they would want. I haven't seen it go though to the level of like the foldables and all of those things being a reason to switch. I know when we talk with Samsung, they do believe that they've got a good strategy there, introducing the foldables, introducing the new ways of working with those screens. And it is a compelling story, but we're not seeing it materialize just yet. So it's very interesting to see how that Samsung's got a great ecosystem, Zebra's got a great ecosystem. They both have got their different form factors that add value to their ecosystems. Which one's going to win out? Which one's actually going to draw customers to them? I think we're still in a kind of a wait and see there.
Yeah, I'll be interested in the foldable use case. I didn't even think about that, but I've played with those. I love it, but I'm trying to think of the guy in the warehouse if that'll ever be a use case. But then there are certain warehouses I know where they have tab cover pros like the larger tablets or the Zebra ET40s, the larger format devices for people that are in the warehouse. So it does make sense, as you said, that why that might be something we see in the near future.
Foldable is a good answer for them. Field workers have high breakage rates. You know, the guy who doing pest control in your house, or the person going out to service the HVAC on a building, etc. Foldable with a that could expand out may be the better option for them than a cellular phone plus a tablet. So I'm very interested to see if they buy into that as well, because obviously right now they are at a premium, but if it's saving you the cost of two devices, maybe it's worth it.
On the cellular or even like field service, what's your thoughts on BYOD? I thought for a while there were a lot of companies like, oh, just have employees bring their own device and do this. And I feel like it's sort of swung back the opposite way where everybody's assigning devices. Is BYOD dead for the front line?
They may have been running things on the devices that did not present well for their brands, etc. And then for the ones who actually were like full-time employees, they found that a lot of times they actually had to pay like stipends or pay for the cell phone bills, etc. to say, hey, you're using your own device to do the enterprise job, the job of the company, so you deserve a little bit of compensation for that on your data plans, etc. And the economics of it the economics of it are turning around to the point where data plans haven't grown in cost as much as other things in the world. Cellular devices haven't grown in cost, and in some cases have actually come down in cost to get an appropriate level of quality for their cellular devices. It may actually be economically more feasible for these companies to have corporately owned, but maybe personally enabled devices, so that BYO is becoming less attractive to them. We are seeing it. Uh, More and more have just made the switch with, okay, if you've got BYO, that we're going to let you keep it for now until you ask, but new employees are getting devices given to them.
The next question I had for you was around, and I remember it was probably like a decade ago. One of the analysts from Gartner said MDM was a race to the bottom, which I think it's never gone to the bottom. I feel like it's continued to level out and add up in its skills. But I've heard people say recently MDM is a commodity. What are your thoughts on this? Is that true or false? Will MDM ever become a commodity, especially with Google and Apple trying to get into it?
And Google and Apple, I think, are taking it towards the commodity thing where, in the sense that everybody has to have it. It's no longer an option. Even the SMB space, right, is going to have an MDM. But in terms of like the larger customers out there, the enterprise style customers, a company like Stratix, we have an incentive to say, you guys don't have to worry about the MDM. We're going to take care of that for you. So from your business perspective, just trust us. We're going to do it. We do want it to be a commodity in their eyes, because that enables us to then say, okay, now that we know you, what you're trying to achieve with your business and your business outcomes that you've got, the problems you're facing and the ways of managing everything, let us pick the right platform for you. And there is a right platform for you. We have lots of different considerations when we do pick a platform for a customer, such as the organization structure, the change management philosophy, the culture of how that customer supports those devices, supports their end users. So I don't think that it is just I have XML code that I'm pushing out to a device. That's not it. It's everything else around it. Like a good example is Omnissa has got these extra layers of authentication required when you do something like push out a large change. And for a security conscious company or a company that cannot have downtime, that may be a good feature that drives a little bit of extra value. Has nothing to do with actual MDM, but has everything to do with how you manage large fleets of devices that differentiates. So, yeah, I do believe MDM is the same between everybody, and SMB is going to get it and everybody needs it. So it's a commodity in that sense. But the different providers are truly different, and there is a reason to pick one over the other.
That's a good way to frame it. I'm going to describe this as the operational burden um, that happens for managing these things. I feel like there's a lot of things where I remember that you just put an MDM and manage your devices. How hard can it be? Like there are a lot of pieces that go into this. I know back to your point of like the Stratix Mobile Operations Center, you guys have a lot of different aspects you manage, even the one you just said around you push a large change, you want to have authentication around it. Like, what are, if you had to like pick, like, here's the 4 or 5 like management burdens that people overlook or don't think about when they're picking an MDM or, deploying one.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, sticking to the MDM area first off, I mean, like, there's definitely a lot more tweaking that has to happen in large MDM deployments than customers realize, right? It is not just, I've set it, it's set until the next time there's a big change. It is constantly watching, making sure there is no alerts, nothing's failing, that things are happening as they're supposed to, even if there's no changes in the environment. Because if your devices are actually getting used, guess what? Is it checking in? Is the battery charged? Has it broken and you don't know it? Or has a new security threat been entered into your environment and you haven't paid attention enough to actually capture that? So the day-to-day feeding of a platform, any management platform, but MDM in particular with frontline workers and exposed devices is a very overlooked element. The other element that, you know, I find is quite a good selling point, I guess, for us is customers don't want to do the 2 a.m. change windows. Even if they've got teams of it, like the 2 a.m. change windows are not fun when you've got 2 or 3 guys looking after 10,000 devices. They have to test everything ahead of time, make sure the change works as appropriate. And please do test a change before you deploy it because these things can take your mobile devices down. And then doing it at 2 a.m., being up and actually being ready to support at 6 a.m. when your frontline workers are opening the store and everything has only half of it's gone through and all that sort of, making sure that it did what it was supposed to do. I think that's another very overlooked element there. So I will go with, testing your change, planning and testing your changes, implementing the changes out of business hours, and then being ready to support those changes after they have been deployed with not only with MDM players, but also with help desk and let's say other devices ready to go if needed. So those are some of the big ones that I see. Yeah, and then I'll talk about the upgrades a little bit, but it comes down to the same kind of like be ready to test kind of things.
I like I look forward to Elizabeth and your marketing team having tired of working at 2 a.m. Call Stratix. That'll be your next
Yeah,
next ad campaign. It makes sense. No, I've been on a lot of those calls and they are, it is a bit much. So it is awesome to have a partner that can run and drive and operate that for you. My last question, this might be the most political one. There are, I'm going to call them a couple different tiers of MDM platforms. You have I'm going to call them the big enterprise grade tier, which is the Omnissa Workspace One. There's SODI, Intune, and then there's I'm going to call them specialty, where they're really focused on being good at one thing or a certain niche or even industry. So like the Hexado, 42 Gears, Jamf, Ivanti Neurons, Scale Fusion, and then there's another tier that is like OEM specific. So Samsung Knox, which I think you talked about earlier, Elo View was one that allowed for managing Elo tablets and displays, and then Zebra has like their DNA Cloud. There's a couple other ones that are out there. Like, how do you think about that industry and actually guiding customers? Like, what are the questions when you start with when somebody's like, "What should we use?" Like, what is the first thing you start with, and then what are the other questions that you try to drive into to help them make their decision
yeah.
there?
So realistically, let's start with like the OEMs and the real niche players. Like if what you're trying to do is very specific and very uniform, that's where I get into like the OEM. So like let's take Knox Configure. If you need the device to turn on with your logo and not the Samsung logo or not anybody else's logo, Knox Configure is one of the only platforms that could get that done. So yes, we're going to push those very OEM specific things to make that use case. We have some home health, home health, yeah, home health medical customers. I'll just go home health medical customers that they want their logo to be the only thing that shows up in the entire kit. So they use Samsung devices because we could do that. So that's where those OEMs have like a niche, doing things on their own devices that nobody else could do. Not every use case is like that, and not always is that a very big number of devices. So you do get into some of the others that may do that very well, but they also do other things. I'm thinking of like Esper here, which is amazing on kiosks, does great with if you have to really deeply tune Android, they're great on that. They also do iOS. They also do regular use cases on their platform, but they've really got their specialty. So if that's the case, where 99% of what I need an EMM for, or an MDM for, is that one use case, then yeah, we will get into those niche players. But then when we start getting into the enterprise customers who really are not just any one thing, that's where we start getting back to the big players. And most of the customers that are choosing Stratix for their, hey, I want you to support every use case in my enterprise across the world, those are the kinds of companies that are not going to be looking to save $1 on every single license. They're going to pick the platform that makes it easiest for them to support their entire enterprise for the long term. So yeah, getting back to it's like very, very specific use. Let's use the OEMs because they're going to be able to do things that nobody else is. Um, but then you move up to how complex is your business, how many different use cases are you supporting, etc. And as you do that, we do find ourselves working with the more mature, more established, more flexible even players in the market. When it comes to that tier, though, we could even start differentiating again. They do have some like Intune is free, and every enterprise is running the Microsoft Azure Stack, the Microsoft Entra, Microsoft Windows, etc. So they have a leg up there. Am I going to really try and push somebody away from Intune if that's what the corporate strategy is? No, but I definitely will recommend tools to enhance Intune, such as, of course, BlueFletch has got some tools that we recommend. When somebody does insist upon running a platform that may have some holes in it, we find ways to fill those holes if we can.
That's a good way to stratify. Yeah, definitely. So I know we're at time. So for me, I think the couple of the big things here today is there is no one right solution for everybody. I think is the first biggest takeaway I had from you. I think the if you don't want to stay up at 2 a.m., call Stratix. That's definitely. I look forward to seeing that ad campaign come out soon. And then I think the BYOD, I think is, definitely dead based on some of the cell things. I didn't even think about the cell phone costs and how those have gone down, but that was a really, really good call out. So, Dipesh, if somebody's looking for more information or wants to find info about Stratix, where could they find you? What's your website?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're on stratixcorp.com. So it's all one word, stratixcorp.com. And then, of course, LinkedIn, and we're on the social media. So if you want to go see more of our podcasts and things of that nature, we're on YouTube as well.
Awesome. Excellent. Dipesh, thank you for joining me today. And thanks to everyone for listening along, and really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank you for tuning into the Frontline Mobility Edge. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe for more content every month. If you'd like to learn more about BlueFletch, check out the link in the description or visit us at bluefletch.com. See you next time.